We are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us live. Nick Barris here with malpractice attorney Clint Kelly, taking your phone calls and comments on Facebook. We're streaming live at newschannel5.com. Clint, I don't know if this is anything in your realm, but we've got several folks when we're talking about the safety in the nursing homes and assisted living facilities, also asking about prisons and jails, and you've seen some stories there about the spread at some of these facilities. I'm just curious, from your perspective as an attorney, do some of these families, malpractice or otherwise, potentially, as they would with a nursing home, have a case maybe against a jail or a prison if they have a loved one who was infected and perhaps got very sick or died because of negligence behind bars? Is that something that's actionable?
Yes, and that's handled a different way. That's handled through the Claims Commission. It's usually a claim against the state because the state runs the prisons. Now, what people need to understand is the state is subcontracted that work out to corporations. So there are private corporations that handle most of the prisons, and what you do is you sue the state, and the state stands in the shoes of those private corporations. There's a $300,000 cap on any claim. But yes, you can make a claim that the prison was negligent in failing to control COVID-19 exposures, and if that led to hospitalization or death of the inmate, and the inmate can prove that the prison failed to take appropriate steps to prevent exposure or to fail to mitigate the exposure, then there would be a claim.
Clint, I don't know all of the dates one way or the other, and you maybe are still researching this. Jewel has messaged us on Facebook saying her thinking is that the Gallatin Center's first day of lockdown, she's thinking, was March 12th, and she believes restrictions and others checks were started days before. What date should the lockdown have been started to have done so properly if it did start that early in March, or is that not early enough?
Yeah, we contend the lockdown should have started at the latest by March the 1st.
Okay.
But, Nick, it's not really the lockdown that's the issue here at Gallatin. The problem with Gallatin was the failure to properly vet the staff who were coming in. In other words, the staff who were bringing infection into the facility, the failure to track the folks who were at high risk of exposing patients. Then when they had sick patients, the failure to isolate those patients and get them away from the healthy patients so that the virus wouldn't spread. And then, Nick, this just blows my mind. They were using a biometric clock. It's a clock, it's a time clock. You stick your hand on like this, you slide it in and it reads the bottom of your fingerprints to identify who you are. And you stick it on when you come into the shift, and you stick it on at the end of the shift. And they were using this clock throughout this entire episode. You have to take your gloves off to stick your hand onto the biometric time clock. There were no wet wipes around it. So every staff member who's coming into that facility twice a day is touching this time clock. Now think about that.
Wow.
It's things like that were going on.
That would be what you're saying is that would be an area where clearly the virus could spread. One hand after another, everyone going to the same place and then not sanitizing.
Sure, the CDC had reported even before March the 1st that if a virus got onto a surface like, say, an airplane tray or on a table, it could live for 3 or 4 hours. So if people are putting their hands on a surface repeatedly over and over again, you're allowing that virus to sit on a surface where it can be picked up and spread. But there were so many things that were going on inside the facility that were completely at odds with what was being preached, if you will, to the public and to healthcare professionals as to how to prevent COVID-19 exposure and spread. I just don't think the lockdown was the issue. I think it was the failure to take proper precautions once the lockdown was initiated.
And it's interesting. I'm not talking about Gallatin's situation here. I don't know what the situation is in Gallatin, but I've heard from several individuals who work at a variety of facilities in general, Clint, and the employees have reached out saying some of the issue was brought up by them themselves, but that management it fell on deaf ears, and that in some cases, and again, I'm not talking about Gallatin, but some other places as well, they were told from management just to keep quiet about it and not say anything and just keep going about their business. I mean, do you think it was that negligent in some cases? And again, I'm not referring to Gallatin because I don't know there, but some of these other ones that we won't name?
I know of two other facilities who I represent clients at, and I can't name them right now because I don't have experts yet to identify what the negligence was, if there was negligence. But what I'm being told at those facilities is in line with what you've heard. These were employees who were reporting concerns to management about the failure to properly, for example, enforce PPE, wearing the masks like they should during the time periods that they should, making sure that patients who looked like they were getting sick or coming down with the virus were segregated and isolated so that those patients couldn't spread it to other patients. They're reporting these things to management, and management is doing exactly what you said. Tell them, look, keep your mouth shut. Tell us whatever you need to tell us, but don't go telling anybody else, and we'll take care of it. Because what the nursing homes detest more than anything else is media scrutiny. They can't stand it. There's a lot of reasons for it. Certainly, for one thing, it's embarrassing. Secondly, they can lose patience over it. And third, and the last thing they want is for a news story to trigger a state inspection. So that's why they tell everybody keep their mouth shut.
Okay, and I understand. And business in general, bad publicity is never good. But do you believe then, Clint, that in some cases then it's willful negligence? Is it that they just are thinking about bottom line, to heck with these patients? Or do you think it's more of a case that they're thinking, it's not as bad as we think it is? Or that maybe in some cases they thought they were taking the proper steps and just got it wrong?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I can speak to Gallatin. I believe that's exactly what it is at Gallatin. There was a corporate arrogance that we have this under control. Where did we hear that before, by the way, Nick?
Yeah.
And they didn't. And it took them a while to figure it out. And then once they figured it out, it was too late. And that's what I believe happened at Gallatin. And I suspect some of the other places that have had large outbreaks, I bet you're going to find that's the common denominator, is a corporate arrogance that permeates the management. And the unfortunate impact of that is it gets people hurt or killed. Yeah,
Connie on Facebook is saying a lot of people are doing this. Really what hits home for me is what you said earlier, and based on my own family experience, is that you see that there are a vast number of these assisted living facilities and nursing homes that have not had a problem, and they did it right. And so when you look at standard of care, which is a term you've taught me, Clint, it's if you do it right in standard of care. So we know there's a bunch that have done it right. So when you see one or two that are really going off the rails, well, there's a problem there. I mean, that's just common sense. It's going to have to play out in court. But something was going on is the way I would look at it just from the outside.
When you hear some people, and it's not many, it's a small percentage, but people say, oh, we got to immunize these places because there's nothing they can do. It's a pandemic. They can't take care of themselves. And then you say, but wait a minute. What about the 95% plus of the other nursing homes who aren't having these outbreaks, who are taking care of their residents and protecting them right? How are these people doing it and this little 5% not? And the answer speaks for itself. And by the way, I want to add one other point to what we talked about before the break about this immunity, issue of immunity. I want people to understand what this is and what this isn't. Doctors, hospitals, and nursing homes all have insurance. All of them. None of them practice or provide health care without insurance. The people behind this immunization effort are insurance companies. They're the bean counters with the green shade, sitting down, looking at the numbers, trying to keep their profits up by not having to pay for defense of claims and to pay compensation for claims. That's all this is, Nick. This is not frontline people, because frontline people have insurance and frontline people have protection from lawyers provided by the corporations. This is about the corporate treasury. This is about corporate dollars. That's all it is. I want to make sure people understand it, because some people think, gee, you sue a doctor, you're coming after his house. That is wrong. We only sue doctors who have insurance, and all doctors have insurance. Same with nursing homes, same with hospitals. So this big push you're hearing about, this is the insurance lobby trying to hold up their profits.
Yeah, well, there's people on Facebook saying, basically that blanket immunity is absurd, is what they're saying. And let the court play it out. If someone did everything right, then they should be acquitted, okay? I know it costs money to defend yourself. If they did something wrong, they need to be hammered. Question for you on this before we get to some phone calls, Clint, just with regard to waivers. You've talked about that in the past. Is it possible that some of these facilities could have had their residents or inmates, however you want to call them, sign waivers when they come in that could somehow insulate them from any kind of lawsuits?
You wouldn't be able to do that because by the time someone got it in their brain to have a waiver created, the virus is already there, and so there's no consideration for the waiver. These people are already in the facility, more than likely.
Oh, yeah,
so if you try to get them to sign a waiver.
Yeah, I just thought maybe if it was something that is standard in some of these clauses when you move into any facility last year, the year before that, where it just kind of in the small print has some type of waiver when it comes to some kind of legal protections.
Yeah. I haven't seen one, but Nick, I doubt seriously any court would enforce it.
Okay. See a lot of people here, commenting that they want to contact you with potential cases, and I want to remind folks, we'll put up Clint's number at the end of the program. His office is there in Hendersonville. He's one of a handful of malpractice attorneys, meaning that's all he does in the state. He's certified for that. Listen, let's take a phone call before we get to our first break, and we'll go to Jimmy. Jimmy, good morning. Are you there? Do you have a question or comment, Jimmy?
Yes, I was wondering, could you possibly hold like the nursing home officials as well as like Tyson Chicken also, who's quite negligent in what they were doing, for homicide, negligent homicide charges?
And this comes up with some of your other cases before the pandemic, Clint. You're a civil attorney in this, but have you seen cases and in this case where it crosses the line over into something criminal?
Yeah. Jimmy, in the Gallatin cases, I can't say that. I don't have proof of acts that would constitute a criminal type of culpability. It's civil. It certainly was reckless, but it didn't cross, in my judgment, the threshold of criminal. However, with that said, Jimmy, I think you're going to find in some limited instances, either in the nursing home cases or perhaps in Tyson, and I've heard some bad things about what's going on with the Tyson plants, you might have a situation where someone passes away and that the culpability crosses the threshold into being something that's criminal. It wouldn't surprise me because of some of the conduct I've heard. Nick, I don't want to prejudge Tyson. I'm just telling you, I've talked to someone who worked at Tyson. That's going to be, I think that's going to turn ugly in time.
We shall see. Listen, we have to take a break on that note. When we come back, we've got more phone calls for you, Clint. The line's open, 737-7587. If you're following us on Facebook, a lot of good comments there. If anyone has a question, I can pass that on to Clint as well. And keep in mind, those of you wanting to contact him, we'll have his number on how you can reach out to Clint if you have a question about a potential case at the end of the show. We'll take a break and be back with more with him right after this.